Whoop whoop. ABARAT time. Clive Barker. And we are on chapter 20. Chapter 20. The World Through Borrowed Eyes. Of one thing Candy was absolutely certain. There was no sight on earth to equal the view from the top of the colossal head of the Yebidim Day. Wherever she looked from that high, wind-swept platform, she saw wonders. She had help, of course. Not only did she have Samuel Hamstring Klepp V by her side to point out things, and to occasionally catch hold of her arm when a particularly strong gust of wind threatened to carry her over the edge of the great head. And he had also supplied two very accommodating squid, which clung to their heads, and then so positioned their boneless bodies that their eyes, which were immensely strong, could be used as telescopic lenses. Klepp's squid were his pets. One he had called Squub, and the other Squiller. At first, Candy found it a little odd to be wearing a living creature, but she supposed it was like any animal that worked with a human companion, a horse, a dog, a trained rat. It was just one more reminder that she was not in Chicken Town. If you want to get closer to something, Klepp said to Candy, just say a little closer if you don't mind, Squiller, or a little farther away if you don't mind, Squiller. It's important you be precise and polite in the way that you speak to them. They're very particular about their little courtesies. Candy didn't have any difficulty getting the trick of this, and after only a minute or two, Squiller had made himself so much at home on her head that it was no more peculiar than wearing a hat that had been left in a box of fish for a few days. Certainly, Squiller appeared to be eager to give Candy the best possible view of ABARAT. Half the time, she didn't even need to ask him to alter his focus. He seemed to know what she wanted instinctively, as though he was reading the brainwaves coming off of her skull. Candy didn't entirely discount the possibility. She'd read back at home that squid showered extraordinary means of communication with one another. How much more likely it that the equivalent species here would be blessed with some miraculous power. The whole world was filled with magic. At least that was the impression Klepp gave her as he named the islands of the archipelago and spoke of the miracles they contained. Every island is a different hour of the day, he began saying, and on each island you'll find all the things that our hearts and our souls and minds and imaginations connect with that hour. Look there. He pointed toward a place not far from the Straits of Dusk. You see that island wreathed in light and cloud? Candy saw it. The cloud rose in a rolling spiral around what looked like to be a vast mountain, or perhaps a tower of gargantuan size. What is it? Candy asked Klepp. The 25th hour, he replied, sometimes called Odom Spire. It's a place of mysteries and dreams. Who lives there? That's one of those mysteries. Though I have heard the name Fatomaya associated with the place, I have no idea what that means. Yo, I think this is what the squid looks like. Check it out. Cool. Candy's new squiddy friend Squiller did his best to focus on the clouds around Odom Spire, but for some reason the billowing spiral prevented her closer scrutiny. If you're looking for a glimpse of what's on the other side of the cloud, Klepp said, don't bother. The light plays tricks with the eyes, somehow, and you just can't get a good grip on it. And then sometimes the clouds will part and give you the illusion that you're going to see something, but you never do. Not to my knowledge. So what would happen if you sailed a ship right into the clouds? Oh, people have certainly tried that, Klepp said. A few came out alive, but happily crazy, and of course completely incapable of describing anything they'd seen, while the rest didn't come out at all. You guessed it. One of them was my father. He let this information hang in the air for a moment. Then he said, you look cold, my dear. It's just the wind. Let me get you a jacket. No, I'm all right. I insist, Clive said. I don't want you getting pneumonia. I'll be back in a moment. He headed for the elevator. Candy didn't protest. The wind was a lot chillier than she had expected it to be. You stay away from the edge now, Samuel said, and pulling the elevator gate closed, he disappeared from sight. While he was gone, Candy and Squealer kept up their pursuit of the islands. Samuel had named them all for her several times, and Candy now tested her memory by putting the names to the location. Some she remembered easily, others she had to puzzle over for a while. The island to the west of the Yevadim Day was called Quam Ha, and its red-roofed city was called Tasmagor. Yes, that was it, Tasmagor. To the southeast, it was a mountainous island called Spake, which stood at 10 o'clock in the morning. At 11 o'clock was the island of Nully, and 12 noon, the island of Yizel, which was bathed in the warmest, most magical light imaginable. At 1 o'clock was either Orlando's Cap or Hobaricus. She couldn't remember which. At 2, conversely, was either Hobaricus or Orlando's Cap. So to the southeast lay another sun-drenched island, which was the place she remembered where Samuel had said life was supposed to have begun. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, also called Nods. At 4 was Gamana. At 5 was an island called Soma Plume, in the center of which was a vast ziggurat. At 6, far to the east of the Yevadim Day, though separated by only 2 hours, was an island called Babylonium, where it looked as though life was fun all the time. There were several huge circus tents pitched in the middle of the island, and colored lights in the tens of thousands flickered in the branches of every tree. I have to go there, Candy thought to herself. To the north of Babylonium was an island of the name which she could not remember, though she remembered the name of the still active volcano in its center, which was Mount Galgal. G-A. Mount Gali. Yeah, Mount Gali. The tide of the evening then wound around the archipelago, ending up where she was standing at 8 in the evening, looking down on the straits of dusk. And then, in the vicinity of the Yevadim Day, lay a second series of islands. At 9 in the evening was a place called Hap's Vault. She asked Samuel who Hap was, and he told her he didn't remember. At 10 in the evening lay the island of Ninnyhammer, which had on it a town occupied by a species called terry cats. The town was called High Slatter. The name of the island at 11 had skipped her mind, but she remembered the name of the Midnight Isle, Gorgosium. It's the most terrifying place in all the islands, Samuel Klepp had said. Avoid it at all costs. There were 6 pyramids, some large, some small. At 1 in the morning, which was called Zuga. It was called Zuga. And at 2, another island wreathed in darkness, the name of which escaped her. Next door to it, however, lay the island that was most attractive to her eye, despite all that Samuel had said about its architect. The island was called Payan, and covering it from one end to the other, and so bright with light it could have mattered that it was the middle of the night there, was Comexo City. The towers and the domes of Comexo City were completely unlike anything Candy had ever seen before. Huge and elaborate configurations that looked as though they... Holy shit. Excuse me, please. Okay. The towers and domes of Comexo City were completely unlike anything Candy had ever seen before. Huge and elaborate configurations that looked as though they'd been conjured from a geometry that didn't exist back home, then raised in defiance of physics. By contrast, the island beside it was an ominous place, with an impenetrable-looking mountain range. It was called the Isle of the Black Egg, and it was one of the outer islands she remembered, along with Speckle Frew, which was at 5 in the morning. Beside Speckle Frew were the 2 islands joined by the Gill Holly Bridge that stood at 6 and 7 in the morning. That left only Obadiah at 8 in the morning. And she had come full circle to the little sunlit city of Tasmagor, perched on the eastern flanks of the Qualmha. "You're looking rather pleased with yourself," Clep said as he emerged from the elevator. In his hand he had a light green jacket, covered with small, bright red designs. She accepted it gratefully and put it on. "I was trying to remember the islands," she told him as she pulled the collar of the jacket up. "There were a few I couldn't remember, but I think I made quite a good..." She stopped talking. A terrible look had appeared on Clep's face. His eyes had grown huge, and he was no longer looking at Candy, but instead was staring past her into the sky above her left shoulder. "What is it?" she said, almost scared to turn, but turning anyway. "Run," he yelled. She heard him, but her feet failed to obey her, and she was too astonished and appalled at the sight that flicked into the sky behind her. There was a moth swooping down on her, a moth with the wingspan of a small plane, and mounted on the back of this stupendous and terrifying insect was her old pursuer, Mendelssohn Shape. "There you are," he yelled at her. Now, finally, Candy's feet agreed to obey her panic. She started to run toward the elevator where Samuel Clep was waiting to grab her and pull her to safety. But even as she ran, some instinct deep in her gut told her that she wasn't going to make it. The moth was coming down too fast. She could feel the freezing rush of its wings against her back, so fierce it almost threw her over. As she stumbled, the moth's immense and many-jointed legs closed around her body and plucked her up off the roof of the tower. "Got you," she heard Shape yelling triumphantly. Then he spoke some incomprehensible order to his mount, and then the moth beat its vast wings and rose up into the air. Candy caught and smeared a glimpse of Clep's horrified face as he reached up to try and snatch her out of the grip of the moth, but he was inches short of catching her hand. Then she was carried up and away, over the edge of the great head of the Yebadim Day. She was terrified. Her heart became like a drum thumping in her chest, and in her head, a trickle of sweat ran down her spine. Poor Squiller was still attached to her face, clinging now more fiercely than ever. Candy was curiously thankful for his presence. It was like having a good luck talisman. As long as Squiller was with her, she felt she would survive whatever lay ahead. Moving tentatively, so as not to alarm the moth, she was hundreds of feet above the waters of the Sea of Isabella. To be dropped from such a height would certainly bring her adventures in the ABARAT to a quick end. She put her hand up to stroke the squid. "It's going to be all right," she murmured to the trembling creature. "I promise I won't let anything happen to you." It helped her to have another life beside her own to protect in this terrible situation. She had made a promise to Squiller. Now it was up to her to make good on that promise and bring them both through the adventure ahead alive, however dangerous the journey became and however terrible the destination. And that concludes chapter 20. What the heck? It's kind of cool. Chapter 21 is called The Hunt. I'm going to try and get another one in relatively sooner than later. But whoop whoop, have the best day.